Okay.
Cool. All right. It looks like we're probably live. Hi, everyone. Give us a thumbs up or say hi in the chat so we know you all are here because we can see you.
Looks like we got 59 people so far.
That's awesome. Let us know where you're all logging in today from. And we'll give everybody else a couple of minutes to join. Hi, Ken. Hi, Lisa. Where is everyone signing in from? Is everyone from Washington State? Do we have folks from outside of Washington State as well? Bothell, Arlington, Bellingham, Seattle, Linwood, Everett. Heavy representation from Washington. Oh, we've got San Jose, California. Which other states are in the room today? Another Barbara from California as well. Hello. We have someone from Portland, Washington, D.C. We'll just give it another minute, folks, before getting started. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. All right, maybe let's get started. It's 7:03 p.m. Pacific time. We are dialing in from Washington State. My name is Preeti. I'm the founder of Adventure Tripper. Adventure Tripper is a marketplace for active adventure trips where we connect folks with local guides across the world. We offer active adventure trips across 25 countries and 15 states across the US. Today's webinar is a part of our free webinar series, which we do every few weeks, where we either highlight and showcase different destinations across the world or talk about educational topics, bring experts like Lee and Emily to talk about educational topics, right from Camping 101 to Introduction to Mountaineering to backpacking, which is our topic today, for mostly for folks who want to get introduced to backpacking, go on their first backpacking trip. We have our guests today are Lee Jacobson and Emily Snyder. Lee is the founder of Washington Hikers and Climbers community, Facebook community, which has over, Lee, how many, 250,000 people now, more than that?
Over 250,000.
Wow, one of the largest or the largest, I think, community for hiking. And he has several years of experience. I don't think I can ever do justice to introducing Lee. He's been instrumental in me getting introduced to, hiking and getting hooked to hiking and getting hooked to the trails. But he's an avid hiker, backpacker, and Emily is a part of the Washington Trails Association, instrumental in maintaining the trails here in our beautiful state of Washington. But I'll pause there. I'll let Lee and Emily introduce themselves before they get started with today's presentation.
Thank you, Preeti, and thank you for giving us a platform. I would say that Emily's the one who actually knows about the outdoors. I'm just kind of an observer. But my name's Lee Jacobson. I am the founder of Washington Hikers and Climbers group page on Facebook. We also have several spin-offs, including Washington Hikers and Climbers for Newbies, for people just starting out hiking. And that is actually the group that is doing the presentation tonight. And Emily is an accomplished trail maintenance aficionado for Washington Trails Association and also an administrator of the Washington Hikers and Climbers group page. And I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Snyder. Like Lee said, I do work for Washington Trails Association. I'm on the Trails team staff. I coordinate our trail crews for Central Puget Sound, which is mostly King County. We work with the Forest Service, DNR, King County Parks, also a lot of local city municipalities when they have trail projects they would like done. And then I also run our SAW program for the whole state. So when we're doing trail maintenance, that includes taking all the trees that blow down off the trail. And there's a lot of training that goes into doing that safely. So I'm the coordinator for that for Washington Trails Association, and I liaison with the Forest Service to make sure we're all in compliance. Yeah, and then I've been an administrator with Washington Hikers and Climbers page for a while now. Ken and Lee nominated me while they were out snowshoeing one day so that page would have someone to take care of it if they didn't come back. Thankfully, they came back. So we're all here today to share our knowledge about what we all do and our love for the outdoors. So I'm glad we could be here.
That's amazing. It's amazing what you guys do for the community. So yeah, thanks for making the time and the initiative. I know you have collected a lot of questions already from the members of the Washington Hikers and Climbers newbies group. So what we'll do is just housekeeping for folks. If you have any questions, please leave them, type them in comments. We'll keep a tab on the comments, and at logical places, I think Emily will keep a tab on the questions coming through comments. They'll pick up the questions as they can, but towards the end, they'll definitely make sure all the questions are answered. But I will stop there and let Lee go on with proceed with the slides, right, from why really go backpacking when you could just do and be happy with hiking. So with that, I'll leave it to you to dive straight into why backpacking, how to go about it, and folks, you can leave your questions and comments.
Thank you, Preeti.
Thank you.
So we also have an assistant in the behind the curtain, Kit, who's going to help us with the slideshow presentation. So if you hear us talking to a third person, that's who we're talking with. But first, I thought we'd start out with why backpacking? Why is backpacking better than day hiking? And I don't mean to put down day hiking at all. I day hike quite a bit myself. Backpacking's, takes more effort and more commitment. But backpacking does have certain advantages. And one of the advantages is that you get to see the landscape in a lot of different lights. When you do a day hike, you'll go out to some location. You'll get there early afternoon, maybe. You'll see what it looks like in early afternoon, and then you'll go home. And you don't get to see what it looks like in the morning. You don't get to see what it looks like at night. And when you go backpacking, you get all of that. And to give you an example of that, I thought I would show you a place that I went backpacking a couple of years ago, a fairly nondescript backpacking location. It's Fortune Ponds. You can see Fortune Pond in the photo here. And when I got there, I kind of thought, this is nothing special. But as I saw it under all sorts of different lights, it really became a favorite place of mine. This was just a staging area for the highlight of the trip, which was jumping onto the Pacific Crest Trail and going to Pear Lake and Top Lake. But when I came home, my favorite photos were of Fortune Pond in the different light of day. And maybe, Kit, you can show us. This is morning at Fortune Pond. Then the fog cleared, and all of a sudden there was this intense reflection in the pond. I was mesmerized. I just stood next to the pond, gazing into it. The reflection of the trees seemed more real than reality. And then next slide. This was evening around the pond. Emily, maybe you can say why you like backpacking while I compose myself.
Yeah, also love the amount of time you get to spend in one place when you're backpacking. Um, I like that it gives you the ability to go a little further each day, if that's the kind of trip you've planned. If you're staying in one place, as we often are for trail work, it's fun to see it kind of in all its lights and just to really absorb being out there in a way that you don't get to do when you're hurrying home on a day hike. So,
Yes, several other advantages of backpacking are that you get to go further into the mountains. You don't have to go home at the end of the day. You know, it's always kind of a bummer coming back to the city after the end of a day hike. You've had this beautiful outdoor experience, and now you're back in civilization. And when you backpack, you get to stay out there. And another nice advantage of backpacking is that it gets very quiet at night. You can go to places that are overrun with people during the day, but at night, only a few people will remain, and you get your wilderness experience at that time. So, one other thing we're going to talk about before we get into backpacking gear are a couple basics about backpacking. Some of you wanted to know how far you can go and how much time it takes. Obviously, backpacking is slower than day hiking because you're carrying 25, 30, 35 pounds. We're not even going to get into Emily's trail maintenance weight. But you might have a backpack that weighs anywhere between 25 and 40 pounds when you're going overnight. And that's quite a bit heavier than your, 5 or 10 pound day hiking bag. So you obviously can't go as far. Emily and I were talking about it before we got on, and we both have the same estimator as to how far and how fast we go. We go 2 miles an hour with our day packs on and a mile an hour with our backpacks on. Emily?
yeah, that, the nice thing when we were talking about this is on your day hike, you may go 4 miles in and, spend a half an hour, 2 hours there, but then you still got to go the 4 miles to come back out. So yes, you're moving twice the speed, but you have twice the distance to do. Whereas if you're backpacking, you go that 4 miles in and you're done for the day. And then maybe the next day you go 4 miles deeper in and you see less people and you get to see something even more remote, more beautiful. So, it's a little slower pace, but it's really enjoyable. You get to take in more of it and you get to be out there longer. So I think carrying the extra weight and being able to stay overnight is absolutely worth it.
I think the maximum I've done with a backpack is probably, for most of the time, it's probably 10 or 11 miles max.
Yeah.
The nice thing is you can start you wake up in your tent. You don't have to drive to the trailhead, so you can start hiking. I've started hiking as early as 7 or 8 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have all day. You don't have to drive back at the end of your hike. So you can hike until 5 or 6 at night. You can really get a lot of mileage in.
Yeah, I think when you're first starting out, picking those hikes that are, 5 miles or less to get into your first night camp spot is a good starter hike. Once you've gone a few times and you kind of know how it feels to be carrying that weight in and up elevation, then absolutely you can push it to 10, 15. I know the PCT through hikers do, 20 mile days, but they're walking from sun up to sundown kind of a thing and not really taking a ton of breaks. So I think your comfort and fitness level all play into that, but 5 to 10 miles a day, depending on terrain, is a pretty good metric.
Yeah, and you raise a good point, which is the first time you go out, pick something easy. We're going to have a list at the end of this session of some good first-time backpacking trips. Some of them are like Highest Lake, are barely over a mile long, and you can just take your backpack out, hike 1.25 miles. Highest Lake is beautiful, lots of campsites there. Get used to setting up your tent, cooking on a stove, things like that, and slowly increase your distance, as you get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's move into gear. And we are going to start with the 10 essentials. Most of you have probably heard of the 10 essentials. I have confessed to various people that when I do certain day hikes like Rattlesnake Ledge or Poo Poo Point, I don't carry all 10. I'll carry 9, but I might not have a map to get up to Rattlesnake Ledge because I've been there so many times, I'm not going to get lost. But when you go backpacking, you're going to want to make sure you have all 10. First one is navigation. A lot of people use an app on their phone. I am partial to a map, a paper map. I think they give you a better layout of the whole area. I have a compass. I tend not to use it because I'm pretty good at knowing what's north and south and east and west. Emily, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I just would say with this, it's really important to have some redundancies. If you're going to be out overnight, you need to not be totally reliant on something that's battery powered.
Yeah.
So yeah, apps are great. And there's a lot of really good map apps out there. But I would also always have a printed map, whether it's something you're buying from the store or printing offline. The WTA website has printable maps for all of their hikes on the hike description page. You can also download them onto your phone. If you save them into your My Backpack account, they're available offline when you're out of service. But I would always have a printed map, especially if you've not been in the area before.
Absolutely. When I go backpacking to somewhere I've never been, I get a paper map and I study it for a week or two before I actually head out on the trip so that I know what that area is going to look like before I even get out there.
Yeah. And this is probably jumping a little bit ahead, but it's important to have enough of a map that you have alternate exits on it and you can see the side trails in and out of your area. So if you are passing junctions, you know where they go to or have some sense of what's off the edges of your map. So I wouldn't zoom it in so far that you can't see kind of the area on your map.
That's what's great about buying, a paper map like Green Trails or something at REI. You'll see a huge expanse of area and where all the trails heading off your trail go to. And I'm a big proponent of those Green Trail maps.
Yeah, those are fantastic. I love them. I have a lot of them.
Yeah. So also sun protection, sunglasses and sunscreen, extra clothing, headlamp or flashlight. I recommend a headlamp. Don't rely on the flashlight on your phone. It's going to drain the battery pretty quick. You'll want a first aid kit.
First aid kit appropriate to how long you're going to be out and how many people are in your group. So you can take a small one if it's just you, but you need to be able to. And I will say, if you have the opportunity to take a wilderness first aid or even just a basic first aid class in the city somewhere, like that's great knowledge to have heading out. And they do go over in depth if you in any of those wilderness first aid classes, kind of what basic backpacking first aid should look like. So.
And for some reason, that reminded me something about headlamps and flashlights. Another good thing to have if you're going to be out for a few days is an extra set of batteries in your backpack, because you don't want to get one day out and then find out that your batteries in your headlamp were just about dead, which has happened to me. So I carry an extra set of batteries in every pack that I have. And when I put those extra set of batteries into the headlamp, first thing I do when I come home is get another extra set of batteries, throw them into the backpack.
Totally. Somebody asked in the chat, what would we at a minimum have in our first aid kit? I think minimum is, basic Band-Aids, blister prevention, kind of some sort of ibuprofen, Tylenol, painkillers, also some sort of Benadryl or analgesic like that. I don't know, just basic comfort things. An ACE bandage is a good thing to have. Some vet wrap or some sort of athletic tape is great to have. That serves a lot of dual purposes. You can tape your boots back together. You can fix holes in tents, so athletic tape is great. Hand sanitizer. I'm trying to think what else is in mine. There's, the basic kits at REI that they sell that are labeled for, how many days out or how many people in your group parties. Those are great places to start. So if you're curious, go check out and see what's in there. Tweezers. Usually if you have ticks in your area, tick key is a good thing to have. So but any of the sporting goods stores, like Cabela's or REI would have some basic first aid kits that are good. And they're usually labeled, like 3 days, 5 days, 3 people, 2 people, 1 person, that kind of thing. So
I just purchased a sort of a military style traumatic injury wrap that I'm going to throw into my backpack.
Called Israeli bandages, yeah.
Israeli bandages, exactly. And I did it after I read John Adams' post about getting caught in a rock slide headed up to Marmot Pass. And fortunately, there were some people there who had some pretty high-tech bandages and wraps. And he had opened up a big gash on his head, and they wrapped him up, and they got him out of there, and he went to the emergency room, and the doctor said, "You were lucky you had that wrap. You might have bled out."
Yeah, I think that's the bleed kits for us, at least for the trail maintenance stuff. Like that's a huge thing. You're in the wilderness. It's going to take time for anybody to get to you. It's not like calling 911 in the front country. You should expect 4 to 8 hours for a response time from search and rescue. So you have to be able to keep yourself okay and comfortable for that long. So we carry Israeli bandages. There's a blood clotting gauze that has blood clotting powder in it that they sell at REI as well in the first aid section. We carry that. We carry a lot of anything that'll pack a wound. We'll do your t-shirt, but you need some. And then you can also carry tourniquets. They sell. If you haven't taken a first aid class and know how to use them, there's not a lot of point in carrying them. So that's why, if you can take even just a basic first aid class, they've even got just free online seminars now that you can click through. They're helpful. But yeah, the bleeding out is an issue in the backcountry if you really fell and had a traumatic injury, but yeah. I think it's pretty rare. You're in more danger driving to the trailhead. So, yeah.
Always like to point that out.
Yep.
So the other items, 10 essentials, repair kit, and tools. It looks like this list has replaced knife with repair kit and tools. Nutrition, extra food, extra water, an emergency shelter. I have an emergency blanket in my backpack. It's about yay big and weighs maybe a few ounces. And I don't know, what do you carry?
I have 2 things I carry. It looks like it's the emergency blanket material, but it's a poncho. And for our weather, that's a lot more useful. I've tried to use a lot of emergency blankets on folks that have gotten hypothermic on work parties, and they just don't stay on your body very well. They tend to blow around, especially if it's windy and wet. Anyhow, so we've gone to these emergency blanket ponchos. You can buy them in a 4-pack on Amazon. And I also carry a bivy because I don't, worst case scenario, I crawl in that bivy and I'm going to stay warm. Not having something dry to get in is horrible in our wet weather. So, yeah. And the same thing, it folds down to I don't know. It's really small. It's like 2 inches by 2 inches. It's tiny. So those are my 2 emergency shelter yeah, I figure if I've got the hood on, if I'm in the bivvy and I've got the poncho on, then I'm in pretty good shape if I can get any other insulation in there. We skipped fire. So you do want to have some sort of way to make fire, although everything's so wet here. It's hard to get anything to light. So
those waterproof matches, they will pretty much light under any condition.
That's true.
That I've seen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So let's
carry two. Like that's the thing. Is like some of these things, like you want to double up. Like you were saying, having the batteries for your headlamp, extra batteries. Like if I've got a lighter, I don't have one, I have two. If I have one lighter, then I've got waterproof matches with me. I also keep all my little candle stubs and spent birthday candles in a Ziploc bag, and those work really well too to help as fire starter. So just a little baggie of kind of candle butts is helpful.
Yeah, good point on the lighter. I carry 2 lighters in every pack. You don't want to, just like your extra batteries, you don't want to get out and find you can't light your stove because all of a sudden your lighter's out of fuel. So let's go.
There's a couple of questions. The second blanket. Oh, so I talked about an emergency poncho. It looks like a space blanket material. They're orange and that shiny mylar on the inside. You can find them on Amazon. And then the other one I said was an emergency bivy, BIVY. And they also sell those all over the place. Hang on, let me just check. Oh, one of the other questions was how much extra food? If you're out for multiple days, I would carry it. Like I typically carry at least an extra full meal. So either a full, like a fat breakfast or an extra dinner, and a couple extra snacks. It depends on what I think I'm going to be out, but I usually take an extra half a day, maybe it's worth of food. I don't usually take an extra full day's worth of food.
I do pretty much the same. I throw an extra dinner into the pack, one that I don't think I'll use. And I do load up on snacks because, you can always survive off those for a day if you have to.
People are usually really surprised at how many calories you burn when you're back there, between trying to stay warm and the fact that you're exercising and walking and carrying that weight. You really want to plan for 3,000 to 5,000 calories a day is pretty average. If you're doing trail work, we plan for even more than that. So your usual 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day is not sufficient back there. So
we're going to talk a little bit later about backpacking food, and most of the dehydrated meals say they are 2 servings. And I have found that 1 serving is not enough for me when I'm backpacking.
Yep. Cool. All right. Should we move to the next slide?
Yeah, let's move to backpacking list. Now, I sent this list out to people on the Washington Hikers and Climbers for Newbies page. If you want to get this list from us and you don't have access to that page, maybe you can shoot us your email address, or you can join either the Washington Hikers and Climbers page or the Washington Hikers and Climbers for Newbies page, and we can send you this list that way. Now, the list is pretty self-explanatory. I'm not sure absolutely everything on this list is necessary, especially when we get onto the next page. But one thing to know about this list is that not everybody in your backpacking group has to bring one of these. If you want to save weight, which we all want to do without endangering ourselves on backpacking trips, you can double up on some of the gear. Obviously, everybody needs their own sleeping bag. Everybody needs their own sleeping pad. But tents come in not just 1-person size, but 2-person size, 3-person size. And, if we have I have every size up to 3. If we go on a 3-person backpacking trip and everyone's good with it, we will just bring 1 tent, 1 3-person tent, and we all sleep in it. And, I know that can seem a little weird if you're not used to it. But once you get to be experienced backpacker, no problem sleeping with somebody else in a tent. It's just the way we roll to save a little weight.
Yep. And other easy things to divide up are like the stove and fuel you're going to share. The water filter is another thing you only need one of. Actually, it's good to have a backup for that because you don't want to be without water. But those are things to like. Typically, if we have 3 people, somebody will carry the tent, somebody will carry the stove and fuel, and somebody will carry, some of the other shareable items. So.
Yeah, you'll find in terms of a stove, most people are using, I think, pocket rockets these days or the jet boils.
It runs the gamut. I see it all out there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there are other things, whisper lights and things like that. But I usually bring one stove for 2 people, sometimes 3 people. But I will have everybody bring one fuel canister. Although one fuel canister can probably get 2 people through a 3-day backpacking trip, no problem. Good to have an extra. No, the full-size ones.
Okay, so yeah, it's important to know which size we're talking about.
Yeah, you might want to check online to see how many boils you can get out of each size fuel canister. I do have some friends who will bring the rather small ones, but I'll bring, I don't know exactly what it is, but a little bigger size, very common. And they're usually good for 2 people for 3 days. So
I'm used to solo carrying all my stuff. So I carry usually 1 or 2 of the small cans because they fit in my cooking setup. So I think it depends on how you're used to traveling. And I always take a fresh one and then usually part of one from the last trip. It depends on how many days we're going out. I mark how many times I've used them on the bottom with a Sharpie. So I have some idea how many I'm getting out of each can.
I'll usually bring a full one and another one that's almost empty because recycling these propane canisters or gas canisters can be a little problematic, especially if they still have fuel in them. So I'll take one out and just keep burning it and burning it and burning it until all the fuel's gone. And then I'll start in on a new canister. And so I've always got one that's almost used up and then a full one. Little better recycling opportunities that way. We're going to run through food separately. I see Crazy Creek chairs. I never take a chair. When I go backpacking, I find a log to sit on. That's
my Z-fold pad is for. It comes out of the tent and I sit on it and camp. And then bear cans are also good for sitting on.
Yeah. We're going to talk about trowel, teepee, and Ziploc baggies in another section. It's got hammock and tent. You obviously don't need both. Some people sleep in a hammock. Some people sleep in a tent. Emily mentioned water filters. You can often, if you have even a Sawyer mini filter, which is just a little filter that squeezes onto a 7-Eleven water bottle, I've used to filter water for 2 people. It takes a while, but it works. If you have one of these gravity drip filters, which we'll talk about in a bit, you can use those to filter for 4 people or more even sometimes. So personal items, it talks about there. Some people ask, can you leave your if you go out for more than 1 day and more than 2 days and you hike somewhere on the middle day, do you have to pack everything back up and take it with you when you go do your day hike, on the middle day? And I always tell people, and this is what I do, is I never pack up the second day unless I'm headed out. If I'm going just to do a day hike somewhere, I'll leave my tent set up. I'll leave the sleeping bag in the tent. I'll leave the sleeping pad. I've never had a trouble with theft. But I do take my, valuables, my car keys, my wallet, my phone. I'll take those with me and not leave those in the tent.
Yeah, we leave our camp set up all week, and we are rarely within sight of it when we're working for trail maintenance. And the same thing, like wallet, keys come with me, phone, but everything stays in the tent. We've never had issues. If anything, people leave more stuff out of there. Nobody wants to carry extra stuff out of the backcountry, so nobody's picking your stuff up. Somebody asked purification tablets for water filtering. I think that's mostly a matter of taste. They have a taste to them, so people quit using them mostly because they have a flavor. So I do carry some as a backup to my water filter if I'm not carrying a second filter. They're great to have in your pack. They're a great emergency item. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with using.
I used iodine tablets for probably the first 10 years I backpacked. And they make a second type of tablet, which takes that taste away.
Yeah, the neutralizer one.
Yeah. So let's go to the next part of the backpacking list. List of the clothing that you want. The two things that I always tell people to bring that sometimes even I forget are gloves and cap. And you want that even if it's 85 degrees in the mountains during the day. This is what happens to me sometimes. It'll be the middle of summer. We're in a heat wave. I know I don't need any extra clothing during the day, but at night it can get pretty chilly, even if it's, 80 degrees during the day. I've been in the mountains where it was 80, 86 degrees during the day and 28 at night. And then it was back to 82 the next day. So bring a set of gloves and a cap, even if it doesn't seem like you're going to need it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter the time of year. I always take my wool base layer to sleep in at a minimum, and just as extra dry clothes for in the tent, even if it's hot out and I'm wearing shorts. And I'm rarely wearing shorts because I'm usually working, but if it's hot during the day, always a cap, usually gloves, and I always have a puffy no matter what the time of year, and some sort of rain gear. It can be super lightweight in the summer if you're not expecting it, but I never go without some sort of a rain jacket or poncho or shell. And I, in the summer, just carry a rain kilt or a rain skirt. It folds down like nothing. So
even if it's not in the forecast, always take the rain shell. How about gaiters? Do you use gaiters, Emily?
A ton of the WTA folks do. We mostly use them to keep the dirt out of our boots when we're working. I quit carrying them because they're extra weight, and I don't care if I get a little dirt in my socks at this point. But yeah, unless it's snowshoeing or something, I don't hike in gaiters anymore.
I don't even use gaiters snowshoeing. I've worn them once in my life up Mount St. Helens, and that was it.
People love them. I do really like the I'm going to forget what they're called, but for the trail running shoes, they sell a little like sock gaiter that's made out of tech fabric, and those are really nice if you're out for multiple days and in trail runners. What those are called? They have a name, but anyhow.
So I know some of
put it in the chat if you all know what I'm talking about.
So I know some of you own dogs that you like to take out. Ken Poor, the one administrator of the Facebook page who is not here tonight, wanted us to remind everybody that you need to bring something to carry your dog poop in, some sort of Ziploc baggie that you can put it in and carry it around for a few days. A lot of people will use like a Pringles container. They'll put the poop into a Ziploc baggie. They'll roll up the Ziploc baggie and then put the baggie into a Pringles container and seal it up. But remember, you'll need something for that. So,
I'm sorry, I just heard my children come home. I'm going to step away just to shut my door. I'll be right back.
okay. Let's see what else we got. Passes. That's a whole another subject. Make sure you have the right passes for the trail that you want to hike. I don't know how many of you are familiar with what passes you need, but basically the passes in Washington break down into two categories: a pass for state managed land, Department of Natural Resources managed land. That's the Discover Pass. And then you have the Northwest Forest Service Pass for the National Forest or U.S. Forest Trails, which are the majority of places where people go backpacking. And the America the Beautiful Pass will cover both the U.S. Forest Service trails and the national park trails. So I guess the only other thing I would mention is shoes. I've gotten into the habit of carrying a pair of Tevas along with my backpacking gear. I like the Tevas because if you have to ford a river and get your feet wet, it's nice to just slip on a pair of Tevas or Crocs or something while you go across the river. Then when you get to the other side, you can put your dry socks and boots back on. If you don't have, and I also like my Tevas for camp shoes. It's nice to take off your boots when you get to your campsite and not have to walk around in your boots all night long. Speaking
I'm
of
a Crocs girl, I love Crocs, but that's because I break my toes too much, so I have to have my toes covered.
Speaking of fording rivers, if you don't have an extra pair of shoes, one little trick for fording a river is you take off your boots, you take off your socks, put the socks in your backpack, put the boots back on, wade across the river. When you're on the other side, you dump the water out of your boots, squeeze the water out the best you can, then you put on your dry socks and then put on your boots, and it's a pretty good way of getting across the creek or a river without doing what you really don't want to do, which is walk around in wet socks for the next hour or two while they dry off. So just a little tip for fording creeks and rivers. But I've gotten into the habit of bringing a set of Tevas, and Emily does the Crocs. Okay, what's next on our list? Maybe food? Oh, no, a few other items to consider.
Yeah, these are all great. Insect repellent. I would also say they sell head nets, which are fantastic, especially if you don't want to be spraying insect repellent all over your face.
Yeah.
We wear them a lot. They work best over a hat of some sort, especially a brimmed hat, so you can keep it directly off your face. It's funny, you forget you're wearing it because it's so lightweight, and you'll try to eat something and you realize you still have the head net on. So those have saved our sanity a ton. Would highly recommend one if you're going out during bug season. The rest of these are great. And I will say the orange vest during hunting season, any orange, any bright colors, it doesn't have to be a vest, but any bright colors will do. And hunters should know not to be hunting on open public trails, but they usually use them to get to and from where they are hunting. So it's not usually an issue. We're back there a lot during hunting season, and everybody I run into is super friendly, very knowledgeable, very courteous, and but it is they're always very grateful when we are in our bright colors, and many of them comment on it. They appreciate that they can see us. So
my rain shell is orange, and so even if it's a sunny day without a cloud in the sky, I'll take that orange rain shell out of my pack and I'll tie it onto the backpack and spread it out along the backpack, so it gives a nice bright orange picture to anybody who might be out there. Okay, next. So that's what it looks like when you've got all that gear into your little backpack. You can see all of these, well, 3 of these backpackers, all right, 2 of them have 2 or 3 have their sleeping pad attached to the outside of the pack on the bottom. I think that looks like it's my backpack on the left. I keep my sleeping bag or my tent on the bottom of my backpack. My sleeping bag goes in a bottom compartment on the backpack. My tent ties on underneath, and that leaves most of the rest of the pack for everything else. But you can see how it really comes together and tidies up very nicely. Okay.
Somebody asked when hunting season is. It depends on what you're hunting for, and it depends on where you are. So hunting season for Washington is going to be different from and it's by state. So it's going to be different state to state. And depending on what's in the area that people might be hunting for. So like high hunt is typically for bucks and deer, and it's frequently in September and October. There's also a bear season. There's also a goat season. There's also a bird season, upland birds. There's a turkey season. So you need to, if you have questions about that kind of thing, if going into an area, the best thing you can do is call your ranger station for where you're going. So I would look up they are a huge underutilized resource, and they have somebody on those phones to answer your questions. So I would just call them and say, hey, is there any open hunting happening while we're, where we're going? And they'll know.
And they do tend to be later in the year, in September, October, November. That
turkey season is the weird one. It's in March, which makes no sense to anybody that celebrates Thanksgiving. But that's when turkey season is. I think there's another one in the fall as well, but it is not anywhere near Thanksgiving.
Double.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we get into water. This shows 2 different filtration systems. On the left is what's called the Sawyer mini filter. It's what I use. You can see the filter apparatus is lower part of the pieces shown there, and it screws on to that little blue plastic bag, and you fill up that little blue it's not really, I guess it's plastic bag. You screw the mini filter on, and then you just squeeze the water through the filter, and it comes out where you can drink it. And you'll see me using one of those here in a couple slides. I love the mini filter. I've gotten to the point where I carry very little water if I know there's going to be a lot of water on the trail. I no longer use the blue bags because I found they sprung a leak after they had been folded up a number of times. So what I'll do is I'll get a heavy duty water bottle that, they sell water in at 7-Eleven, and I'll use that year after year, that empty bottle year after year after year, because it just so happens that the Sawyer mini filter will screw on top of that empty water bottle just as well as it will the blue plastic bag. And I just walk around with my empty water bottle, and when I come up to a stream, I'll fill it up with water. I'll screw the mini filter on top. I'll drink half a liter of water. I'll dump out the rest back into the stream, and then hike another mile or 2 miles to the next water source. I usually keep a little bit in the bottom of my bottle just in case. So on the right,
that's making me twitch. I can't believe you dump your water out. Would never travel without a liter of water. You don't have to travel with more than that, but yeah, our creeks are drying up seasonally more than they used to. So that's another good question for the ranger station if you're going out, is to call and ask where the water sources is, how available is it, are the creeks running, and so you know what you need to bring and how much water you need to carry.
Yeah, and this
Eastern Washington, you're carrying a lot more water than you are in Western Washington.
This is exactly why I said Emily is the real outdoors person here. I'm getting to be an old man and I'm cutting weight where I can. And
it's fair. I carry the bee-free Katadyn, which is what you see next to it, but I don't carry this whole gravity filter. It's way too much for one person. I carry their version of the squeeze bottle. They fit on the Hydro Pack canteens, and they're pretty heavy duty. And so I carry I have a 2-liter bag, and that just the filter part of the bee-free, and that's what I use. I also still sell the old-fashioned pumps. And another thing that I see a lot of people using are the Steri pens. It's a light. It does take batteries. It's a little bit heavier, probably similar weight to the pump, or maybe that whole gravity filter situation. But there are as many ways to filter water as you can imagine, and it really is a matter of preference, and people have very strong feelings about their favorite way. So I would encourage you to try a couple and find what works for you.
Let's go to the next screen here, which I think shows some people using the mini filter on the left, the gravity drip filter in the middle. And there I am with my little plastic water bottle with a mini filter on top. And that was a very hot day in the North Cascades on Thunder Creek. So we were sucking down a lot of water.
Yeah, those gravity filters with the hoses on them are really nice if you carry a bladder. If you carry a water bladder in your backpack, I know you can buy them so that they splice right in. I know Sawyer also sells a splice kit so that you can use the Sawyer Mini to directly into the drinking line on your water bladder, so you don't have to open up your backpack. And it has a quick release. I had it when I was running all the time and carrying a hydration pack that are pretty nice for refilling. So there's lots of options. Somebody mentioned in the comments, be careful not to let your water filters freeze. That is a really good point. If you're out in either the spring or the fall when temps go down a lot at night, or camping in the winter, you need to bring your filter inside at night, or your boiling water. That's always my backup too, is you can always boil your water.
Good point.
Freeze, they don't work.
I've spent many backpacking trips with no filter, but just boiled my water. If you boil your water, some people will say boil it for 5 minutes. I've found that if you boil your water for 1 minute, that makes it safe. I've been backpacking for 30 years and never had trouble with Giardia or anything like that. And,
yeah. It works for the pathogens and stuff in it. The one thing that doesn't do is if you're backpacking anywhere the water's been contaminated from mining, which there is a lot of mining depending on where you're backpacking up in the Cascades, then it doesn't take any of like arsenic or any of that stuff out of it. So it's just something to be aware of.
Interesting. So on the photo on the left there shows why some people don't like the mini filter, is because it's a very small filter. And he's probably got to fill that bag twice to squeeze enough water into his Nalgene bottle to carry around a full liter. So that's the downside to the mini filter. The bigger filters can filter a lot more water a lot more easily. So, okay, next one. Now we're getting into the food.
Sorry, the filters do take care of other things. Like you have to read on the filter package. It'll tell you what it's capable of filtering, and it will tell you if it'll take some of those mining chemicals out. And the big one around here is arsenic. And it's places like Monte Cristo, Dutch Miller Gap, anywhere that, there's been mining at Gold Creek Trail and Gold Creek Pond up at the top of Snoqualmie Pass. That also has, and there's usually signage at the trailhead that'll tell you. It says not the bee-free or the Sawyer, the MSR filters. It'll take out heavy metals. Thanks, Ken.
Okay, so food. A few different ideas. First off, there are lots of companies that make dehydrated food. I'm a big fan of Peak these days. I know there's a lot of specialty brands out there. I tend to find that noodles rehydrate better than rice does, so I tend to focus on the noodle dishes. I love their granola. You just throw in cold water, filtered water in the morning. You get about 700 calories. The beef stroganoff, this is a two-person meal. I will eat two servings. I'll eat both servings. One serving's not enough for me. Two is actually a little bit more than I would like. So sometimes I'll bring a one serving container and something else to supplement it. I think we have some more food on the next slide. These are different. I know a lot of people love the pad thai. I've yet to find a good scrambled egg.
Yeah,
keep trying.
Yeah. If you have food, anyhow, I'm gluten-free, so I don't do any noodles unless it's like pad thai and their rice noodles. The Backpackers Pantry does have a lot of good GF meals and vegan meals. They're really good about labeling their stuff. So I eat a lot of Backpackers Pantry. I can't eat two servings. And so one of the hacks is you can open those packages up and divide them in half. And if you use freezer Ziplocs, you can't, or the silicone stasher bags, you can divide them into those. They have to be the freezer weight on the plastic, or when you pour the boiling water in, it'll melt. But you can pour boiling water into a Ziploc freezer bag. So I get the half gallon, divide them into two, and then they roll up really small. They fit better in the bear can. And then a lot of people I know, a lot of the WTA folks use just the bubble wrap mailers. And if you slide your Ziploc bag in there, it keeps it warm while it's rehydrating. And they also sell commercial, like little sleeves you can slide them into to keep them warm. But just a reused bubble mailer works really, really well.
Yeah, another thing you can do, if you empty out these bags into two separate Ziploc baggies full, then you can use the empty container to boil your food in. I've gotten to the point where I no longer carry, dishes and pots and pans on my hiking trip, again, just to save weight. And I will cook my meals right in these bags. I'll eat right out of the bag. And then when as hard as it is, I'll suck down those last few spoonfuls of the second serving, and I'll have an empty bag. I'll seal it up. I'll roll it up, seal it up, and then I throw it in my Ziploc baggie that I bring along for garbage. So you can make your own meals. I've done this sometimes. I'll bring some dried couscous, some slivered almonds and yellow raisins in another Ziploc baggie, and I'll bring up a can of salmon. And I will heat. I don't have pots and pans, but I do have a 2.5 cup made out of metal, and that's what I'll boil my water in. And you can cook the couscous in that. And then I'll take the yellow raisins and slivered almonds and mix that into the couscous, and then I'll put the salmon on top, and you've got a nice, sort of homemade meal.
Yeah, there's lots of hacks for meals online. You can look it up on Pinterest or any of this. Just Google it, homemade backpacking meals. Any of these dehydrated foods you can buy at the grocery store, like the Idahoan potatoes, you can add stuff to them.
I do the Idaho potatoes quite a bit. That's a good one.
Those are any of the ramen noodles work great. Adding packets of any kind of protein to them is awesome, like fish or chicken or something. I will say one thing to be careful about is taking really stinky, oily fish into the backcountry. If you're in bear habitat, that stuff is really smelly. And if you're on a day hike, it's fine, you're leaving. But if you're going out for multiple nights, we are seeing more bear interactions. People of them trying to get into food. We've actually had to send out some notes to our crews this year because there's been more bear activity, and they're going after, somebody brought up fried chicken for their lunch, and the bear tried to get into his backpack to get after the bones of the chicken, and somebody else had brought sardines and had them in a Ziploc in their backpack after lunch, and they'd opened the container and the bear tried to get into the backpack. So just be thoughtful about the odors of what you're bringing up, because it does attract critters.
And
We're going to talk about food storage at all. There's lots of food stored. Oh yeah, you've got another.
We're about to go into that. A couple other things for breakfast. You can bring up Quaker oats. You can bring up your own granola.
Protein powders add protein to oatmeal in the morning. So I usually throw a scoop of that in. A lot of people cold soak their breakfast. They'll bring up powdered milk. Nido, Nido, is a whole milk powder. You usually have to, you don't see it in stores very often anymore. I think Fred Meyer carries it. But that adds calories and fat to you need all that stuff up there. So people do dry granola and dry milk, and then you just have to add cold water in the morning. It's nice cereal.
Someone turned me on to Quaker oats, and what I will do is I'll chop up some dried vegetables or dried fruit, like dried apricots, dried cranberries, yellow raisins, some nuts, mix it all into a bag, might put some brown sugar into the bag. And then you can pick some blueberries from around your campground, and you heat up the Quaker oats, you throw those fruits and nuts into it. It really makes a good breakfast. So lunches, I'm mostly bringing bars and snacks. I'm not cooking anything for lunch. So my guess is Emily's probably the same.
I don't cook anything for lunch. I eat a lot of peanut butter on tortillas with stuff like you were talking about added to it. So any kind of dried fruit, or we do a lot of tuna packets. We eat right out of the packet. Can add, somebody mentioned adding olive oil to stuff. You can get little olive oil packets. I also buy the little mayonnaise packets to add calories, mustard packets, anything you can pick up when you do your next, hamburger order for dinner, takeout. Save all your takeout packets. They're great for backpacking.
Any little thing you can throw into your food, I have one friend who swears on raw onion, and he'll chop up an onion before we go, and he'll put that into everything because it just adds that bite to the meal that turns it from something blander into something a little more exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're talking food storage. There are basically 3 ways to store your food in a bear canister. This is a photo of my bear canister at Remmel Lake in the Pasayten Wilderness last year when it got down to about 28 degrees at night. It's got a nice layer of frost on it. The advantages of the bear canister are that you don't have to hang your food like is pictured in the second photo. You can, it fits perfectly into your backpack. It can be a little hard to open when it's frozen like this, but it's pretty foolproof, and you can sit on it as a chair. The downside is it's a little on the heavy side, so if I don't have to carry it, I will do what my friend Jim Cusack is doing in the second photo, which is hanging the food. You bring a rope, put a little weight on one end of the rope, you toss it up over a tree branch, then the weight brings the other side of the rope down, you tie your bags of food onto it, and then you hoist it up into the tree. You're supposed to hoist your food 20 feet up and 20 feet out from the trunk. And I will tell you that is pretty much impossible in Washington. The trees just don't have branches that big and that long to where you can do that. So you just do the best you can. When the ranger asks you, do you understand? You have to hang 20 feet up and 20 feet out. You say, I'm very familiar with that. Thank you. And then you just do the best you can. And usually if the ranger comes by the next day, and you're saying, hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't do exact, he'll say, yeah, you did better than most people do. So, or she'll say that. So,
there was a question in the thing. Do you still need to keep your bear canisters away from camp? Yes, they still smell like food. You want your cooking area and your bear canisters, 100 yards away at least from where you're sleeping.
Yep. And one thing I always do is check which way the wind's blowing. I don't want to cook in a place where my tent is downwind from the cooking area, because that'll just blow the smell from your stove and your food right over your tents. So I'll check which way the wind's blowing, and I will find a cooking area upwind from where my tents are. Same thing goes for hanging your food. I don't hang the food so that the wind carries the scent over my tents. If my tents are to the right in this photo, I'll want the wind blowing to the left so that the smell goes opposite way of my tents. And then the third way some people store food is in an Ursack bag. I'm not real familiar with them, but they're supposedly odor-proof and rodent-proof.
Nope, they're only bear-proof unless you buy the extra expensive Ursack, which is also rodent-proof. There's different grades of Ursacks and different sizes. There's also a fourth item called a rat sack. Looks like lightweight chainmail with heavy duty Velcro closure at the top. And that isn't bear proof, but it is critter proof, and you can hang it like a bear bag. The Ursacks are nice. You only have to tie them around a tree. You don't have to hang them 20 feet up in the air. The idea is the bears can't tear the fabric or get them open, get the tie open. You do still need a plastic liner of some sort in there if you expect it to get rained on at all, which here it almost always does. And same thing with the rat sack. The rat sack needs some sort of plastic liner in it. So I use those scent proof Ziploc bags in there. But my go-to, and I've used all four methods more than once, and my go-to is my bear can. It is a little bit more weight, but I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to think about where I'm hanging it, and I can sit on it. Once I've gotten my stuff out of it, it makes a great chair. Anyhow, so there's advantages and disadvantages to all of them. And again, it comes down to preference. I will say that bears getting into our food is becoming more and more of an issue as there are more and more people in the backcountry. So there are more regulations coming, especially on the Mount Baker Snoqualmie Forest. Within the next year, you're going to see bear cans or Ursacks required on the MBS coming soon to a trailhead near you. So it's going to be worth investing in at some point. You're going to have one or the other. So even if you're just car camping, you have to take care of your food. If there are bear lockers, put your food in there or keep it in your car overnight. Don't leave stuff out, even if you're just going for a walk. They're just seeing more and more bears getting into our stuff.
I will say that my go-to is hanging food. Again, because I'm trying to save on the weight. But hanging food does come with its own problems. Getting good at throwing your rope and rock over a tree limb and getting it to not get stuck and come down the other side so you can tie your food onto it is a little bit of skilled backcountry practice. And I have definitely had nights where it's taken me an hour to get that bear rope hung up. If you are the type of person who likes to take a little alcohol on your backcountry trips, I would recommend hanging your bear rope before you start drinking. One of the most important things I ever learned.
Yes, that is one of my favorite stories you tell. We have a couple of questions in the chat. How do you bring a bear can on a backpacking trip? Seems big and heavy. Does it fit in your pack? Depends on the size of your pack, but yes. And they come in 2 sizes. The size that we have pictured here is the bigger one. There's one that's half that size. That's more of a weekender size. And I would say that bigger one, I carry a 60-liter pack when I'm backpacking. Most of the time I carry 80 liters for trail work. It fits very comfortably in there. My bear can goes on one side of the backpack and my sleeping bag goes next to it. And then stuff gets jammed in around it. So it only takes up one side. I would think a small bear can would fit in a 40-liter pack. It wouldn't probably fit in anything smaller than that.
Yeah, I actually take my big bear canister and turn it on its side, and it fits perfectly at the bottom of my 65-liter.
There you go. There's another question. Do you want to hang your food during the day at camp as well, or only at night? I would say anytime you're away from camp.
Exactly.
So I would hang it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next. This is why sometimes you bring your bear canister, even if you want to hang your food, because there are places in Washington. This is the Pasayten Wilderness area, the Horseshoe Basin Trail. Beautiful area, but there aren't really a lot of good trees to hang your food in, especially there are some a ways away in this photo, but if you're camping, towards the forefront of the photo, that's going to be a hard place to hang your food. And had studied this photos from this area enough to know that the trees were pretty sparse. So I brought my bear canister. I knew I was going to have trouble hanging my food. Okay. Leave no trace. We are going to kind of run through these pretty quickly, but just as I'm sure many of you have heard about this, but leave no trace is a set of principles that we try to emulate when we go into the outdoors. People have a lot of different names for it. Leave only footprints, take only pictures, pack it in, pack it out. A number of different sayings, but there are 7 principles, and we will try and run through these and relate them to backpacking. Plan ahead and prepare. Know ahead of time where you're going to try to camp. Know where the campsites are. You want to camp at an existing campsite. So you want to do a lot of studying of trip reports, get a guidebook and read where the campsites are, and know where you're going to try to camp at night. Have a plan B in case you get there and your campsites are full. Bring what you need to bring to pack out your waste. Plan ahead and prepare. Anything you got there, Emily?
Yeah, I would say be prepared for extreme weather always. So whether that's extremely hot or extremely cold, know where you're headed and know what the weather extremes are there. And, we always joke about plan for, be prepared for the worst case scenario and hope for the best.
Having to call search and rescue is not good for leave no trace camping. So number 2, next one.
That was, yeah.
Travel and camp on durable surfaces. You want to take this one, Emily?
Sure. Yeah. Stay on your maintained trails is a big one. They are there as a way to mitigate saving the environment around it. So we have impacted our environment by putting a trail in there, but we are keeping everybody on the same path and allowing the rest of the nature around it to be natural. Stay in your designated campsites. And that really means camping on durable surfaces. So either an already established campsite, sandy, rocky areas. You want to stay off the heather, stay off any of the untrampled areas. It takes a long time for those small plants to grow back, especially the higher you are, the more impacted the foliage, any of that plant life is around you, down to the lichens, so
Yeah.
you want to make sure you're camping at least 200 feet away from the lakes and the streams. Everybody wants to camp on the lake shore. It's super pretty. Or right next to the creek, but for a variety of reasons, you're going to want to stay away from those, partly for contamination, but also like they're super buggy. You just don't want to be that close to them.
Sometime you will have to choose between camping next to the lake or camping at an established campsite. And I think somebody mentioned that the rangers would prefer, if you can't do both, that you camp in an established campsite, even if it's closer to the lake and stream than otherwise desirable.
Yes, that's true.
So, yeah, don't camp in the meadows, as pretty as it can be. So next, dispose of waste properly. God, we could spend a half hour on this one. You're going to want to read up on how to pee and poop in the woods. It's people's favorite subject or their not favorite subject. But
take your toilet paper out with you, please.
Yeah, please take your toilet paper out no matter what else you do. If you have to poop in the woods, go away from the campsite, go to a place where people aren't going to be camping or looking for water. Dig a cat hole with your trowel, and we'll show you what one of those is. Dig it 6 to 8 inches deep. I dig mine. Emily and I have great visuals that we can give you about how to do this. And they all involve leaning up against a down tree or a standing up tree, and using the tree as a brace and squatting down and digging a hole right under your bottom and pooping right into that hole, and then covering it up with dirt. So
if you're with a group, I'd highly recommend digging a group privy. That's what we do when we're out with our trail crews. We find somewhere, usually we try to go about 500 feet to even up to a quarter mile away from camp, for privacy, depending on how much cover there is. And we'll dig a big trench, and depending on how many days we're going to be in one place, it might be 2 feet deep by 4 feet long. And we've even put tarps up over them so that you can be dry in the rain when you're going, which is really nice. And then, left some sort of little flagging off the side of the trail, or we use the trowel or the shovel as a door key. We leave it on the side of the trail. And if it's there, it's open. And if it's gone, somebody's in there. So, or we'll tie some, a ribbon or a piece of, flagging tape around a stick, and that's the door key, like however you want to do it. But if you've got a lot of people in your group, better than you all trying to find someplace every morning and there being 16 cat holes at the end of a weekend, like dig one and decide where you're going to put it and just have that be your spot.
Yeah. Bring a Ziploc baggie or two to pack your used toilet paper in. After you wipe up, I put it into a Ziploc baggie. I seal that up. I roll it up. I put it into another Ziploc baggie, roll that up, seal it up, and I put it in my pack. And I know that grosses some people out, but it doesn't smell. You can walk around with it for a week. I've come back from backpacking trips, and a week later, I'll say, I forgot that toilet paper in my backpack, and I'll pull out the soiled toilet paper that's been sitting in my backpack for a week and never smelled it, never bothered me. So
I use an empty Mylar coffee bag, like the coffee beans come in, put it in there, and you can roll it up. And I have one that has like a zip, has the Ziploc closure on it, and I just roll it shut, and it works really well. Someone asked he said there's a lot of additional gear needed for the first backpacking trip, even when you've got gear for day hikes. Any tips on how to avoid a big expense? Yeah, buy stuff secondhand. There's a lot of good secondhand stores around Seattle and the east side as well, that have good backpacking gear. People come in from out of state and buy stuff for a trip and then just, donate it or take it back to REI. The REI garage sales are great to hit. Check the clearance racks. There's also some gear lending libraries. WTA has a gear lending library, especially if you're taking groups out, that you can borrow everything you would need to take a group out. Let's see.
There's online marketplaces. And another great thing to do is find somebody who's done a lot of backpacking. I own 2 backpacks. I own 3 sleeping pads. I have 3 tents. I have 2 stoves. I have a lot of extra stuff. And you find somebody who's collected gear for a while, go out with them and they'll lend you their stuff and you can see whether you like it.
Yep. Yeah. Somebody mentioned the Goodwills. They all have, the Goodwills around Seattle all have a lot of good gear in them too. Even if toilet paper is biodegradable, yes, you still want to carry it out if you can. Somebody mentioned Kula cloths are fabulous. That's a replacement for women for toilet paper for when you're peeing. It's made by one of our WHC members, and they do sell them now at REI. And that it's a cloth that has a special thread in it so that it is antimicrobial. It folds in half and snaps shut and can to carry it. It's very sanitary. There's lots of options. But
you hang the Kula cloth on the back of your backpack.
Yep, and it uses the UV light to sterilize it too.
Yep, and
doesn't smell it for a week.
I've even got one.
That's awesome. Let's see. Somebody asked if Paula asked if Ursacks are available or allowed in the national parks. I don't believe so, but I think you could probably go on their website to double check that and find out. I think it has to be a bear can or one of their bear poles that you're hanging from.
Yeah. If you ever have a question for national park related issues, here's a pro tip. Send them an email. You will call and call and call and call and they'll never answer. You send them an email, they'll get back to you in 12 hours. So don't be afraid to email your park rangers. This talks a little bit about cleaning your dishes. That's one thing I've gotten away from by eating my foods out of the dehydrated meal packs.
Yes, please dig a sump hole and wash your dishes away from the water. You got to carry your water over to your sump hole to wash your dishes. Even biodegradable soap leaves soap bubbles in the water. And there's nothing more frustrating than going to fill your water container up and there being soap and somebody else's food in the stream. And it's happened to me more than I can tell you about. See, we've got a bunch of questions popping up in the chat. Another one, what's the best time of day to arrive at a camp spot to secure for plan A? Going on a weekday, but not sure if best time. I would say early afternoon, between noon and 2. Honestly, the earlier in the day you can get there, the better, because it really is first come, first serve. So if you're rolling in at 4 o'clock or later, you're probably going to be, at least on the weekend, fighting people off for spots.
Yeah, I've never had much of a problem getting campsites. It's happened to me once or twice, but I tend to hike during the week. And I tend to go to not the most popular places. So,
but if you're going to some of the beginner popular place hikes, you're going to want to get in there, I would say, before.
Or if you go to some place like Jade Lake, it's going to be filled up by noon.
Right. So. Yeah. So the more popular, the earlier you need to go. If it's more remote, you could probably have it to yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Next.
Next slide.
Leave what you find. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Don't pick the flowers. Probably shouldn't be taking rocks out, even the heart-shaped ones.
Don't build cairns unless you're actually marking a trail. Rock stacking is a huge thing. Park rangers will take them apart. It disturbs habitat. It messes with the streams for the fish. It disrupts insect life cycles. Like, it does a whole lot of things. So I know it's super fun and kind of cute, but if you're going to do them, knock them back down before you leave. And preferably don't do them at all. Cairn markers are rocks stacked for a reason. And when we start throwing a bunch of extra ones in there, nobody's sure what's going on. So
yeah, that's where I do my volunteer work and help the rangers destroy the artistic rock stacks.
yes.
So, next, respect wildlife. The biggest problem we have in this respect are people who feed the gray jays. I know it makes a great Instagram photo. It makes a great Facebook photo. You hold out your hand at, someplace like, what's the place in the Olympics that Mount Storm King. You get a lot of people, they go up to the top of Storm King, they hold out their hand, the bird lands in their hand, whether they've got food in it or not. The birds are taught to associate people with food. It makes it impossible for those of us who don't do it to eat our lunches because the birds are always flying around our faces and trying to grab the food out of our hands. So, don't feed the chipmunks, don't feed the gray jays. It's not good for them, and it habituates them to associate people with food. Next, Emily, why don't you have this? This is one of the most important ones.
So most of our wildfires burning are human caused, and campfires are a big contributor. Especially specifically ones that are not well put out. So where you light them and how you put them out are really important. Make sure that they're allowed where you are. In our alpine lakes, they are not allowed above, I believe it's 3,000 feet.
Yeah, it depends on what side of the crest you're on.
Okay. Yeah, it's either 3 or 5. I can't remember. But anyhow, there'll be signs up around the lake. You'll see them.
I think it's 4,000 on the west side and 5,000 on the east side.
Keep them small. Make sure that they are on bare mineral dirt. If there is a lot of roots or debris around, small sticks, pine needles, any of that kind of stuff, that will all catch and burn underground. Don't ever light them in the meadows. They burn down into the root systems and can smolder for days. If you're going to just only use established fire rings. And when you put them out, they need to be dead out. So you have to dump enough water on them that you can stir them. They are sloshy wet. You should be able to put your hand in those coals before you leave the campfire. They have to be that out.
Yeah. And my rule of thumb is no campfires anywhere, anytime after the dry season starts in June.
Yep.
And not until the rains come in September or October. I love a campfire. I love having them when I can, but the fact is you just can't have them in summer anymore, and we need to learn to do without them.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, and there will be burn bans that come up where they start to limit only even in dispersed campsites, and the established campgrounds. Sometimes you can still have them in established fire rings, but the rangers will come around and usually start shutting that down now anywhere between middle of June and the beginning of July, because it's gotten so dry, even over here on the west side. So I think what you're saying, Lee, is absolutely a great rule of thumb. Like wet season in the fall, winter, fine. But late spring, even into the summer, like we just shouldn't be having fires out there anymore. It's just there's too much at stake. And I cannot express enough, working on the ground every day in the forest, how much fuel is on the forest. It is so dry out there, all over the place. So just please be very, very careful.
Yeah. Next. This is the last of the 7 principles. We're going to go through this one pretty quick because we're running a little behind. But one thing I will say, be considerate of other visitors, comes up when you're setting up your tent. try not to set it up right in the middle of everything, where everybody who comes to that area is going to see your tent from the prettiest spot there. Put it back into the trees. If you can find an established campsite there, kind of put your camp out of sight so that other people can come and see nature and not your tent. And also keep noise down at your campsite when it gets late at night. Nothing disturbs your wilderness experience much more than a drunken party laughing and yucking it up at 1 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to go to sleep.
Yeah. I will just mention there's a note in here, step downhill to the downhill side of the trail when encountering pack stock. If you see horses, mules, llamas, goats, any of that stuff, you do need to be on the downhill side of the trail, and please keep talking. Talk to the people that are handling them. The animals need to hear your voices to know you're not predators. And it's really, really helpful. You can just say hello to whoever's riding them or leading them. And you can ask them, where's the best place for me to stand? It's always going to be downhill. If you're uphill of them, they think they spook really easily because they think you're a predator and they think you're going to jump on them. So just stay below them. Try to step off to the side, and yeah, say hi to the riders. They love to say hi back to you.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to move on to, still a couple leave no trace photos. Here's a campsite I stayed at on the way to Ice Lakes, a 3-day trip. We got to the first night campsite. There were a bunch of eggshells in the fire pit there. And so we put them in a plastic baggie and took them out. And the second picture shows an established campsite. You can see it's all dirt underneath the tent. It's no putting the tent up on a meadow or grass or anything like that. You'll see these established campsites along the backpacking trails everywhere, and that's where you want to set up your tent. Okay, next.
Yeah, I'll skip this one, please. Thank you. So I wanted to take a minute just to mention that there are opportunities if you would like to practice backpacking with a bunch of other people. WTA does a lot of trail work, and they do backcountry trips every year. They do two kinds. There's volunteer vacations where you can pay a fee to come out, and you're still bringing your backpack and your own clothes and that kind of stuff, but all the food is provided. And usually the tools are packed in for you, not always, but usually. They're frequently pack supported by the local backcountry horsemen that ride our tools in. This photo is from a backpacking trip at Goat Lake up on the Mountain Loop Highway, where we went in for a week. There were a bunch of these big trees down. This particular tree took us 3 days to cut off the trail. We had to cut it 5 times to get the log and chunks that were movable. So we provide the training and the tools on how to do this. We also do a lot of dirt work in the backcountry, just repairing the trail surfaces, fixing drainage issues, taking rocks and roots out of the trail. So there's lots of opportunities to do, and all these folks that go out and do this stuff it's a great way to go see other people's gear, see how they set up their campsites, kind of learn some more about best practices for backpacking. So I would, if you're interested in doing this, you can sign up for a day work trail party to try it out and see if you like doing trail work. And if you do, then we've got opportunities for you to come out and work in the backcountry with us. We've got trips out almost every week of the summer, all over the state. So it's a great way to explore new areas. I'm actually going down next week to Cowlitz Valley out to Soda Springs out of Packwood. I've never been there. I have no idea. I got directions from the crew leader, and I'm going down to help with some of these trees, and it should be super fun. The horses are packing us in. So it's a great, if you like adventuring with other people, it's a fun way to do this. So can you go to the next slide? I think there's a few pictures of us doing work. This is actually from one of our training classes where we were teaching people how to use these tools. We use these old school manual saws in the backcountry most of the time. If we're in the wilderness, we are not allowed to run anything that's motorized, including chainsaws. So we have to learn how to use these old school saws. Next slide. This is not a backcountry trip. This is a day work party in the Issaquah Alps. This is actually up on Cougar Mountain. Some of the work we do in the winter, but we were building an elevated trail surface called a turnpike in here. And so this was a wooden structure that got built, and then it was filled with gravel, and that got us up out of the wet, boggy mud. So that's some of the other work that we do. You can go to the next slide. This this is just a picture of me and my gear. That's Becca, who is Ken Poor's partner, and in the middle, she's come out on a backcountry trip with me up at the North Fork Sock last summer. It was super fun, and that's actually my neighbor's son, Jack, who was out with us that day. So Lee picked these pictures for me, so it's funny for me to see them. Hard hats are provided. You go to the next slide. This was from one of my favorite trips of all time. I'm really glad he included this picture. This was from a trip up to the Pasayten. We were up there for 10 days. We got packed in by a string of horses, and we moved we were putting a bridge, the single log span bridge across a creek. So we peeled that log, we adzed out the top of it. We set the sills on either side. We used a bunch of rigging to get it moved down the river. It was about a quarter mile upriver where the tree was dropped by the Forest Service for us. And it took us 8 days to get it in place. We cut it did end up with handrails on both sides, and we cut all the posts for it, but we ran out of time to get them installed. So a Forest Service crew went in a couple weeks later and installed the handrails. That's on the last day of the trip.
Was that Robinson Creek?
No, that is the middle fork of the Pasayten, down near where it comes into Rock Creek and really close to the airport. I don't know if you know where the airport is up there. There's an old landing strip and a Forest Service cabin. It's really if you go down into the Middle Fork Pasayten off the PCT, you would cross this. So we had a bunch of PCTers that were doing some side trips that came through that day.
Cool.
Website to sign up for trail maintenance is WTA.org, and you can click on their volunteer button, and there is a ton of information in there on how to volunteer in all the different capacities.
Okay, speaking of WTA.org, we're moving on to our last two subjects, and we're running a little late. Last two subjects are resources for planning a backpacking trip. And then we're going to give you a list of some good first-time backpacking trips. But resources to plan your backpacking trips, one is WTA.org, the go-to site in Washington for trail reports, looking up trail information, learning about things like backpacking, hiking during the winter, snowshoeing. If you are not familiar with WTA, Washington Trails Association, get familiar with it. WTA.org. If you want to learn something about anything related to hiking in Washington, it's very easy to use. What I do is I go to Google. If I want to know what are some good hikes to do in the fall where I'm going to get fall colors, I will Google WTA fall colors. If I want to know what are some good snowshoe trips, I'll WTA snowshoes, WTA 10 essentials, WTA leave no trace, WTA winter hiking safety. You Google any of those and you will get a link to something in WTA that you can use. They have a hike finder map. You can scan various parts of the state. You can screen for short hikes, long hikes, waterfalls, lakes, anything you want on your hike. You can screen and find trails that you can try. And probably the most the thing that most people use WTA for are trip reports. If you want to go to Kolchak Lake, you know, WTA, Kolchak Lake, you will find hundreds of trip reports, some as recently as maybe that day, that you can read about that hike. And it's a great resource for planning your backpack, learning where there might be difficult stream crossings, where a bridge might be out, where part of the trail is slid away, where the campsites are, where the water sources are. Just an invaluable resource for planning your backpacking trip. Or you can go the old-fashioned way, which is getting a guidebook and reading. You know, I have probably 3 bookshelves of hiking guidebooks in Washington, from the old Harvey Manning and Ira Spring books to the new ones written by Craig Romano, Dan Nelson, and a number of other people. They're invaluable resources for planning your backpacking trip.
Also, just one more little plug for WTA. We have a fabulous gal at the front desk whose name is Leslie, and you can call the main number, and she is a wealth of information. And if she can't answer your questions, chances are she knows somebody in the office who can. So if you've exhausted the website and exhausted the backpacking books and you still have questions that you need a person to answer, I would highly recommend calling that main phone number for WTA. And you can find that just on the Contact Us link on the website.
And like I mentioned, if you're wondering about something in a national park, go ahead and email the rangers at the national park. They'll get right back to you. So next slide, I think we have some maps coming up, which is another great way to do research for a backpacking trip. This is a map of the enchantments, actually. It shows where the various lakes are. It shows where the campsites are. It shows the Kolchak Lake entrance to the enchantments. It shows the Snow Lake entrance to the enchantments. Nothing like looking at a paper map to get the lay of the land. You'll know what the place looks like before you go there. Next one.
Can we back up just for a second? Something else just in reading these maps that I've found invaluable is if it says difficult to follow or unmaintained, believe it. If it says difficult for stock, know that that's a little better than difficult to follow, but not much. It usually means there's impediments on the trail. It's either very narrow or there's things that you have to scramble around or on. And then if it says, you can also in the key, it'll have different, if this was in color, you could see that there are different thicknesses and colors to the lines for the trails, and the stock trails are great starter hikes for backpacking. So if it's available for stock, a lot of times that means it's going to be a really manageable trail, especially for a family or new backpackers. So just that's my insider tip on reading a map.
Yeah, and you can't really see on this map that we're showing here, but they do have what we call contour lines on there, which will show how steep the terrain is that both the trail is going up and what the terrain is like on both sides of the trail. And after you get used to looking at these topographical maps with their contour lines, you can get a visual picture in your own mind of what this is like. Maybe coming up Snow Creek, you see that the terrain on your left is pretty steep. There's a little bit of a valley on your right. It's very easy to picture what the trail's going to look like just from looking at the map. And finally, we have what I know a lot of you have been waiting for, which is a list I put together of good beginning backpacker trips in Washington. If you want this list and you can't write them all down fast enough, send us your email address, get on the Washington Hikers and Climbers page and ask, if we could send you this list or if I can just print it out in the comments. We've got the Chain Lakes Loop, a fantastic hike up near Mount Baker. It'll take you, it's a pretty level hike, one steep part up and down. But other than that, it sort of contours around Table Mountain, and you hit a lot of different lakes on your way around. Spectacular scenery, a great hike for beginners, children, a lot of fun. Thunder Creek is a hike through up Thunder Creek to Thunder Creek Basin in North Cascades National Park. Relatively flat a lot of the way as it follows Thunder Creek, which is Thunder Creek for a reason. It's a very noisy creek up into the deep Cascades. Emily, you did a trip report, or you did a trail maintenance at Goat Lake. You can tell them what that's about.
Goat Lake is, it's a lovely, there's two ways up to Goat Lake. One is the old road. It's a little straighter. I think it's a little harder walking and not as pretty. The other one follows the river up, and it's a little more kind of rambling along the river. But it's mostly an easy gain up to right below the lake, and then it's some switchbacks up to the lake, and you come in at a beautiful waterfall that's really wide, something we don't see. It looks more like here in the Northwest a lot. Ours tend to be steep and deep, and this is more of a East Coast looking waterfall. It's really pretty. And then you're at the lake, and the lake is beautiful, and there's big mountains in the background, and there's tons of camping back up alongside the lake. Yeah, that's a great one. It is a little bit of a longer hike. It's like 6.25 miles into the lake, so it's not super short.
West Fork Foss River Lakes is a series of lakes off Highway 2 up the West Fork of the Foss River. That one is uphill, but the nice thing is there's a lake after 1 mile, there's a lake after 2 miles, there's a lake after 3.5 miles, there's 2 lakes after 4 miles, so you can really make it as far as you want. A lot of people do Snow Lake. If you want to see what Snow Lake's like when there aren't people there, go backpack there sometime. You can get some pretty lonely evenings there after the sun goes down and everybody goes home. Highest Lake is out near Salmon-Lesac. It's about 1.25 miles. Great first-time backpacking trip with kids. I think the best beginner backpacking trip in the Teanaway is Bean Creek Basin. It's probably going through a spectacular flower show right now. Got Spider Meadow off of the Chihuahua River Road. I'll warn you about the road there. It's one of the worst in the state. Once you head up the Phelps Creek, the last 3 miles up to the Phelps Creek trailhead, but spectacular scenery. Right now you can't get there because the bridge over the Chihuahua River is out. 8 Mile Lake at the Enchantments area. It's not technically the high enchantments, but probably the easiest lake to access in the permit area, and you can actually get permits for there. I showed you the photo of Horseshoe Basin in the Poseidon Wilderness area. I've hiked to Snow Lake at Mount Rainier with Emily. We spent a day just wandering around Mount Rainier.
In the fog, if I remember.
Yes. Got its own sort of beauty.
Yep.
Crystal Lakes is another fairly easy backpacking trip in Mount Rainier National Park. Lake Eleanor is very short, maybe 1.5 miles, and we were able to get permits there late last year when everything else was taken. Nobody else was camping at Lake Eleanor, and it's just below Grand Park. Summit Lake is a pretty good backpacking trip for beginners. Great view of Mount Rainier over the lake. You'll see a lot of photos of that lake on our hiking page. It is a very rough road up there. If some of you have dogs and you want to go to the Mount Rainier area, but you can't go into Mount Rainier National Park, because they don't allow dogs on the trails there. Both Sheep Lake and Dewey Lakes are a little off of Chinook Pass, and you can do either of those hikes. They're just outside the park. You want to go through the last ones, Emily?
I don't know these. This is your list. I haven't done these.
It is my list. The river hikes in Olympic National Park are fantastic beginner hikes. They're 4-season hikes. You can do them at times in all 4 seasons, as well as the beach hikes on Olympic National Park. Shai Shai Beach, Third Beach, Cape of Lava. They're all just, anywhere from a couple miles to 3 or 4 relatively flat miles long. Camping on the beach is awesome. You hear the waves pounding all night long. You're sleeping on sand instead of hard rock. You can usually have fires there during the winter. Right now, all fires are banned in Olympic National Park. But any of the river hikes too, the Hoh, the Quinault, the North Fork, Skokomish, definitely accessible 3 seasons out of the year and sometimes even in the winter. And if you're looking for a great springtime hike in central or eastern Washington, Ancient Lake, right near Quincy, is a spectacular place when the grass starts to turn green and all the plant life comes out. It's a little different type of hiking. It's canyon country, but really a special place in Washington. And I think that brings us to the end of our show. Does anybody have any more questions? If any of you are on Facebook and you want to reach us, our group again is Washington Hikers and Climbers, or Washington Hikers and Climbers for Newbies. We have a great page 98% of the time. 2%, there's a little internet drama on it, but we have some great moderators who put in yeoman work to try and keep that stuff to a minimum. But you can get a lot of information off those pages.
I'll just, I'm going to throw like 3 more hikes at you guys that weren't on his list that I was just thinking of off the top of my head. Mirror Lake off the PCT South from Snoqualmie Pass is from the pass, it's 3 miles or 1 mile, depending. There's 2 ways to get in there. So that's a really great hike. It's fairly flat. The 1 mile hike is a little bit more up, but the 3 mile hike is very flat and really pretty. It goes through Olali Meadows. There's hardly ever anybody in there. If you want a mountain peak, Green Mountain off of the Swaddle River Road, which is open, is a fantastic hike. It's 3.5 miles up to a set of tarns. There is a toilet up there behind the tarns if you look for the signs. And then you are a mile below the lookout. There's an old fire lookout up there. It is stunning views of Glacier Mountain and all the peaks around there. From the fire lookout, you have 360 views of Rainier, Baker, Glacier, all that stuff. And it's only 3.5 miles to get up there. And then for a year-round hike, backpack, Boulder River is really like another hidden gem off the mountain loop that has lovely campsites through, anywhere from 1 to 3 miles back. And there's gorgeous waterfalls all along that hike. So those are my 3. Good to add to Lee's very extensive list. But thank you all for tuning in and hanging in there for the extra half hour. It's really lovely to get to do this. And thanks, Lee, for inviting me to do this with you.
Always a pleasure. You bring so much to the table. We appreciate all your work for Washington Trails Association and keeping our trails hikeable. You guys do so much, so really appreciate it.
Awesome, thanks.
And thank you, Kit, behind the scenes. We will sign out now, and thanks again for joining us.
Thanks.
Happy hiking.
Happy hiking.